Good hello. Thanks for watching another Sunday case study. We're looking at Mel Gibson. And the first thing that really strikes me as interesting about his hands here is the short Saturn finger. And a short Saturn finger shows someone who is jovial, someone who is very light-spirited, has an almost complete disregard for rules, bureaucracy. It's an interesting one because he's a practical hand. Practical hands stand for rules and order and law, and they are very loyal by nature. And I'm sure this person is loyal to those he feels is loyal to him. Except this person has their own sense of bureaucracy, their own sense of rules. Charles Manson had an extremely short Saturn finger, and there was this kind of sense of extremely happy-go-lucky, devil-may-care attitude. There was a complete lack of regard for rules, of course, and bureaucracy. And you often find it on the hands of hippies, people who live in communes. They have their own sense of what should and shouldn't be, and a complete disregard for what the government wants, essentially. And that I kind of see that kind of nature in his hands, but it's a massive contradiction to have it in a practical hand as well. Practical hands, as I say, stand for this very thing. And his hands, they kind of show someone who is much better with his hands than his head. People with practical hands generally fall into roles of manual labor. And when they become employers, they are very they're actually generally very good employees because they stick to the rule books. And when their employees have done something wrong, they will stick up for them, but behind closed doors, they'll sort of say, "Okay, this isn't where you went wrong." And it's that kind of respect for how to um, how to portray themselves. It's all about routine, order, having things in its right place, and structure. There's a real practicality. As I say, it's a practical hand. Everything is about practicality. And so they often stand for materialism and very grounded career roles, literally working with materials. They often are engineers or can work in construction. They are often working in services that are very practical, have a very functional goal. And it's actually fairly unusual to see an A-list Hollywood actor to have a practical hand. And it's even more unusual to see a short Saturn finger on a practical hand. So we have here a kind of a walking contradiction in terms of their beliefs and their ethics. I think one of the other things that really struck me was this health line. And you can see the way that I use that word struck because you can see the health line doing the same thing here. It strikes at the lifeline. It continues on through the Venus mount. And I've already kind of stumbled over myself here because I'm now asking myself the question, is it coming from Venus or is it coming from the heart line? That's the age-old question with the health line. It's a very difficult line to read. And the answer in the question is, where is the line at its strongest? And I would think that actually it's more coming from Venus, which is a good sign because otherwise what we would see are significant health issues for this person at around about now in their life. The health line working its way up the palm through Venus across the lifeline to towards the health line, the heart line is better because it means this person isn't succumbing to their own health, if you see what I mean. If it were coming from the other direction to attack the lifeline, then we would see this person's life utterly affected by their health. Otherwise, what we see here is something that's more chronic. And actually, the clarity of this health line, the straightness of it, is a really good sign. It shows good health, essentially. I mean, there are health issues, but what there are not as severe. And also, this almost sort of V-shaped formation that the lifeline and the health line are creating it's known as the mark of the vampire in Russian palmistry, and it's an incredibly fortunate and lucky sign to have. It shows incredibly strong instincts. Whatever sort of situation this person falls into, somehow they manage to kind of know what the right thing to do is to navigate out of it again. I don't see it so much on the left hand. That could go some way to explain a developing health issue at this time. And this is probably about the age of, I would say, late 60s, where we are in his life right now. The thickness of the fingers shows a very sort of no-nonsense approach, a very strong personality, very strong skill set. And also that in conjunction with the narrowing of the head and the heart line, I would think this person is probably quite strict. And that again is in line with one of the kind of key practical hands traits. This actually is likely why this person is actually a very good director. Love or hate his films, he is a good director and perhaps a better director than an actor, as the signs in his hands show. I don't see the all-star quality traits of an actor in the hands. That's not to say that he doesn't have the skills. The fate line certainly runs from low down on Luna and rises up towards Saturn in this kind of diagonal arc, the common arc that you see on the hands of actors. What I would like to see in an actor's hands is a forking headline. We don't quite have the clarity here. Luna, however, is very large, a great deal of imagination. And the headline as well, it does tend to have fairly creative art, but it is certainly more of a practical lateral thinker, a planner than a creative, than a dreamer, than an artist. The kink seen in the Mercury second knot here shows a certain sort of predisposition towards physical form, and he is likely preoccupied by the opposite sex and physical beauty. That's not to say that there's a fixation or compensating by womanizing or anything like that. I don't actually see that, which I commonly see in A-list Hollywood actors. The Jupiter finger is very long, and almost so long where it gives the impression of a superiority complex. I'm not willing to conclude by saying that because I don't have the clarity here. I don't think that this is a perfect example of the hand at the right angle to make that judgment. There is a very strong sense of authority about this person, though, when it comes to their Jupiter finger. It's certainly someone who is a born leader. And I notice with Apollo as well, the third phalanx of Apollo seems to be on the fairly wide side, and it shows a strong sense of dissatisfaction with others' tastes, which is a strange thing to point out. I don't quite see the same thing on the right hand, but I think this person is probably quite critical of others and the way that they carry themselves aesthetically at home, if that makes sense. I don't think this person airs their opinions to just about everybody in terms of how other people look, but at home, I think this person is probably quite free with their opinions. Now, as I say, this person is quite strict and likely, pretty good director, but there's also a bit of a coldness about them. That's not to say that they're not unfeeling. The heart line is very ingrained, very deep, especially on the left hand. It's just, and it's low lying enough. It's just on the straight side. There is a coldness, or at least they carry themselves. They have this air, this impression about them. People have that view of them that they are quite cold and uncaring. It does, however, rise to beneath Jupiter and Saturn, which shows that they're underneath this persona that they may well carry across. Their principles are strong. Their heart is actually in the right place. I find it interesting that on the left hand seems to be quite a bit of a space in between Saturn and Apollo. Don't quite see that so much on the right hand. I don't want to take too much away from it, but the right hand we have some slight curvature towards each other. So what that really shows me is someone who is requiring a bit of solace when they are at home. In the workplace, they are a very different person and they work very well in a team, but they are certainly on top of things. They're quite good at working in a team, working with others. There is certainly an efficiency about them when they do that. They're quite comfortable working in a social environment, but at home they certainly need their space and their freedom. I find also interesting the Mercury finger and the way that it leans so sharply away from the other fingers. This person will not be, again, confined by, not by law, by order, by someone else's rules. They won't be confined by a relationship either. They need freedom in a relationship. They need that freedom when they are alone. So this is partly why I think this person probably has difficulties in relationships, not just because of the way they carry themselves emotionally and their emotional makeup. Their love language is quite a complicated one. They likely express their feelings by acts of physicality. In that, I mean effort, not spending money on someone, but spending time on someone. That's how they express love. It's by, my time is worthwhile. So if I'm spending it with you, there is no greater way of me showing my love for you. That's their love language, essentially. Otherwise, if that is not understood, there is no room for a loving relationship with this person. And really, that's their main and only love language, I would say. In terms of career, it seems they don't have a great feeling about their career, and it's not the best of images. It never is for these Sunday readings, but I can see that on the left hand, the way they feel about things are a bit more clear than what the right is showing. There's more clarity on the left hand. That shows that this person, the fate of their career is more uncertain than how they feel about things. And you can see that their success line is actually much greater from around about at the age of 60 onwards. So 8 years or so ago for this person, they had some sort of rejuvenation in their career. And this is fueled, and actually it's a good word to use, and propelled by a great sense of motivation, desire, drive, anger almost. You can see here, and I would think that this is in part suggestive of some of the roles that this person undertook in order to kind of kickstart their career again. They went back to the more sort of basics, back to playing characters and roles that they were they became famous for in the first place. I've got to say, the mole here on the third phalanx of Mercury is a really interesting one because I feel there is something holding this person back, their independence, something holding them back. It could be financial, family related, and it could be alimony or something like that. And maybe it's more than just one case of this. There's some physically freedom type of barrier holding them back here, and it's really affecting them internally. It's weighing down on them. What I find interesting is that obviously we don't have great clarity here, but the family ring seen wrapping itself around the thumb here, it does indicate the amount of children in the form of islands, and you can see there are at least two right here. But in actual fact, Mel Gibson has 9 children by 3 different marriages. So I find it interesting that we have here just one massive, long island, which may well suggest just several children, or at least the thought of several children. We're looking at the left hand. It's almost like an amalgamated idea of what family is. Another thing I want to point out that I find quite interesting is notice the sun line. It kind of provides this impression of an island. I don't know if that's what we're looking at here. It sort of seems to me like an island, and if that is the case, that's defamation. That's this person's character, their reputation is somehow on the line, and they have been character assassinated, or they've done something a little bit foolish that's made them affected their career due to you know what the public thinks about them, how others think about them and perceive them. If that is the case, it looks to be, sort of mid to late 60s onwards, which is again about now. I would think that because we have a right-hand health line and not one on the left, and the formation that we see here, I think this really shows us a predisposition towards bloating, stomach dissension, digestive issues, very sensitive digestive tract, and likely suffers with palpitations, and may have some sort of predisposition towards heart issues. I moved over to this hand here to have a look at the tips of the fingers, because where we see a bulbous kind of nature at the first knot in the fingers, where we start to see that occurring, that's where we see signs of potential um, arterial issues in the respect of clogging up of the artery, high amounts of cholesterol in the arteries, calcified. locked up. We don't see it in so much of the other fingers, just the Saturn finger, and I wonder why. And I would also think that because of where the health line is, I think it's particularly important that Mel Gibson pays particular attention to his health at this time. And as I say, the clarity of it, I think that shows his awareness as well. But the fact that it's developed in the right hand and not the left is something of a worrying sign. Looks to be something of a cross on inner Mars. Now, what does this mean? I believe this means a very sort of combative and a critical, argumentative nature, someone who is likely to get into arguments and may well find themselves getting into trouble because of it. Potential hiccup I mentioned earlier, you can actually see the lifeline forming what looks like an island here. And I think that does coincide with what we see here. And if it's not an island, what I'm seeing here is actually the sun line or success line, Apollo line, becoming thicker, widened their approach to obtaining success and happiness, money is quite sort of bull-headed and aggressive. I have to say, this little cross here I find on NMR is very interesting, and if it starts to develop into a star, potentially the sign of this person might get shot or stabbed. Perhaps he has been in the past. Maybe that's why we see it on the left hand and not the right. Practical hands, like the primary or useful hands, very earthy hands, tend not to have very many lines on them. And because of that, we have to kind of rely more on the chirognomy, which is pretty much what I've done in this reading. But what it really shows us is a lack of almost sensitivity, a lack of creativity and imagination, a lack of thinking. Person with particularly rounded fingertips, and particularly with short fingers, although we don't see short, you know, tremendously short fingers here. It shows more someone who's living in the moment and someone who stands for action, action over thoughts. As I say, we don't see so much of that here. This person does have a good length to their fingers. But really what this shows is a cool, calm, collected character who has, there's a whole undercurrent of complexity underneath, but has a lack of ability to express and articulate the finer details of their thoughts and feelings. That more applies to the primary and the useful hand. Practical hand is still in that kind of earthy category of palms, of that Palmer classification. However, they're kind of more coming into something more analytical and more philosophical. So that it doesn't quite relate there, but there is definitely some truth to it because this person, there's a real sense of practicality over anything else. Um, I think the fundamentals, the basics, the principles, core values, that's what this person relates to. That's what this person is more about. There's a certain fearlessness, bull-headed kind of courageousness. We see an enlarged inner Mars, the thumb itself. Actually, a lot like my last reading for Audrey Hepburn, the thickness of the fingers and thumb. There's a real sense of bluntness about this person and courageousness, stubbornness about them. The width of the hands shows that ability really to handle, quite literally, people um, uh, and really facilitate those difficult discussions, um, engage with, and in social situations, interactions. As I say, this is a born leader, and the width of a hand really goes some way to show someone's ability to manage people. Police officers, judges, lawyers, they should all have a good width of a hand because it shows it enlarges that Mars central plane of Mars. And Mars is nothing without people. We can't have conflict without people. We can't have that societal kind of and social understanding without an enlarged plane of Mars. I find it interesting that on the left hand, the headline is more southward facing. It's more kind of heading towards a creative area. Whereas on the right hand, it is overall, there is a bit of it rises upwards, and then it veers off. It's still on the straightish side though. So we have someone who presents themselves, who is practically speaking, practical, but internally there's a lot of actual creativity there, and that's also backed up by the lunar mount and um, the development of it. The rising kind of forking headline here. Um, Actually, I mentioned earlier, a forking headline is that writer's fork, and it shows that doubling of perspective, and that's what an actor should have. Well, he does have it, except this rising upwards of the headline here is not what I would normally class as a forking headline, and it shows that need to um, make money. If it's heading towards outer Mars, this is more sort of heading towards Mercury in the place of how they express and show themselves and communicate their worth to the world. So there's an idea of a need to validate by expressing, by saying their piece. So I'm going to end it there, and I want to know what your thoughts are. If you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, subscribe, hit that bell and all that jazz. I'm really keen to know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to learn with me, every 2 weeks I will be releasing an assignment, and you can watch and catch up with me and a growing, emerging community of palmists in my fortnightly members only videos. It's $4.99 a month. You can join by clicking in the link on this in this description of this video. Thank you very much for watching, and please let me know who you'd like me to read the hands of next Sunday. Thanks.